Hello and welcome to another edition of Inside Guns with your host, me, the Yankee Marshal. Today I want to talk about a little idea that we hear from people all the time. This little mindset we hear. This, if it just saves one life, it'd be worth it. Usually this is used to justify anti-gun laws. They say, well, if we pass these anti-gun laws and we remove a little bit of freedom, it'll still be worth it if we save one life. And people start to apply that to other things nowadays also. There's some people saying, well, if we would just defund the police and get rid of the police, we'd save these people that get killed unjustly by the police. And if it just saved one life, it'd be worth it, right? No, it wouldn't. Because there's always a flip side to everything you do. There's yin and yang in the world. You can say that if we pass these anti-gun laws, it would save a life or two. And I've never disputed that. If we passed very strict anti-gun legislation, it would save some lives. Some people who would have died at the hand of a criminal or a bad guy, crazy person, whatever, with a firearm, would probably still be alive. But that whole notion that makes it worth it is crazy. Now, I'm not saying human life doesn't have any value. Of course it does. More so to yourself, your own life, or the lives of your families have value. But in the overall scheme of things, we're one in how many billion, each one of us. So we're not that indispensable. Let's get that out of our heads right now. Human life is valuable, but it's not invaluable. It doesn't have limitless value. If that was the case, then you'd have to say, well, we can't ever fight a war because it would be better to live under communist rule with no freedoms whatsoever than it would be to lose the lives of one or two soldiers even. So you'd have to say, hey, we just lay down and give up because we can't risk someone getting hurt. But then again, I guess you would also have to say, well, we need to outlaw mountain climbing because if it saved one life, it'd be worth it. We need to outlaw motorcycles because if it saved one life by doing it, it'd be worth it. And how many times do you give away freedom using that if it saves one life, it would be worth it, before you realize that, no, it really isn't worth it. It is sad when someone loses their life. It's even sadder when you lose someone you care about, because you have to live with the loss. A person who loses their life doesn't have to live with the loss. But it doesn't mean that is something that we could have given away anything for and would have been worth it to give it away if we prevented that death. It's just not the case. It's a ridiculous sentiment. And that's without even looking at the other side of the coin. Like I was talking about earlier, there's a flip side to every story. If you took away guns, yeah, you might stop the thousands of people who are killed with a firearm every year. That's not including suicides. If you take suicides out of the mix, it's only, it's just some thousands of people. In a country of, 360 million, which is such a tiny little infinitesimal amount. You might save those lives. You might, but, I wouldn't say all of them, because half of them probably, if their husband or boyfriend didn't have a gun, they would have beat him to death with a pipe or stabbed him or choked him or something. So a lot of people, crimes of passion, which account for a lot of gun deaths, those people are still going to go. And criminals aren't going to say, well, I don't have a gun to shoot that guy and rob his store. They're not going to say, well, I won't take a baseball bat to his face and then rob his store. So there's probably still going to be close to the same number of people dying as there were if we didn't have guns, or if we did have guns. Close to the same number of people dying if we didn't have guns than there would be if we did have guns. But you would save some lives. So you might be able to say, saving some lives would be worth it. But that's failing to take into account how many people save themselves with a firearm every year. How many defensive uses of firearms save someone's life every year. Now, we know as a statistical fact that there are literally hundreds of thousands of self-defense uses of firearms that occur every year according to the FBI's crime statistics. Let's say that 10% of those were a life and death situation. That's a pretty low number, 10%, right? So we're probably looking at, at the minimum, tens of thousands of people that would have died if they didn't have a handgun to defend themselves. You got to remember, these are little old ladies, women, minorities, etc., that have a physical disadvantage, especially if you're like a little 80-year-old woman and someone decides he's going to kill you and take your stuff. You're helpless unless you have a firearm or something like that to defend yourself with. So you got to take into account those tens of thousands of people that would die if we didn't have firearms. So when you add that up, it doesn't look so good anymore. And it looks like we're losing 10 times as many people as we saved. So is it still worth it if you save one life? And that's not even taking into account the actual principle of the thing. That's just taking in numbers and actual deaths. If you ban guns, when you make guns more restricted, when you make them more expensive, when you make them harder for the average person to get, people are going to die. You're not saving lives, you're costing lives. You're taking one life from the killed by a criminal column, killed by a criminal with a gun column, and then you're adding like 5 or 10 to the killed because they didn't have a gun by a criminal with some other means. Or a criminal that has a gun. Because criminals are still going to get guns if you pass anti-gun laws. There's too many guns out there to keep them out of the hands of criminals now. So let's keep criminals in prison instead of out on the streets. But like I said, that's just the numbers game. We're not even looking at the reality of what you're giving up to save that life. Even if you were actually saving a life, which we've just shown by the numbers, you're not. You're actually costing lives with anti-gun laws. It's just like I said, with the same thing with the police. You could say, if we didn't have police departments, those 10 black men would still be alive that should be alive today. But how many people would be dead because there were no police? I'm betting it's more than those 10 black men. Now, I'm not a big supporter of the police. Everybody knows out there, I'm like, police need to be changed. It needs to go back to like they used to be. They need to be peace officers. Not every patrolman needs to be a SWAT member like today. We don't need militarized police. But like I'm saying, just the numbers though. Of all the people that are killed that are innocent by police officers, how many other people's lives are saved because police take bad people off the street or actually defend someone in rare situations? So you have to look at other than just the numbers. Like we've already proven that mathematically that is stupid. That whole thing about if it saves one life is stupid, because the real saying would be, if it saves one life but costs 5, is it worth it? Would be the actual saying. But you also have to look at, like I said, the principle of it. The freedom. The ability of people to defend themselves. The ability of people to form a militia and defend against threats foreign and domestic. Do we want to be servants? Do we want to be helpless? Or do we want to be people that can protect ourselves, protect our families, protect our homes, and protect our nation? Sometimes it's not worth surrendering freedom. Tomorrow we could say, hey, you know what? One of the reasons people die the most in this country is free speech. Those dangerous words get people killed all the time. They're talking now about how, like, when the president says something, people act on it and someone gets hurt, or, that kind of stuff. Well, if that's true, then we need to get rid of free speech, right? Because it'd save a life. But what would it cost us as a society to get rid of free speech? It wouldn't be worth it, would it? Even if it saved a life. So that just kind of points out how ridiculous this whole, if it saves one life, it's worth it thing is. It's just a bunch of bunk. It's a stupid saying. I wish people would quit saying it, because no, it isn't worth it if it saves one life. If the cost is far greater than the value of the life it saves, then it isn't worth it. It's not a smart idea. Like I said, it's not a smart idea to lay down and say, we won't fight you, Russia, if you take us over, because we can't risk losing a life. We'll just invite you in and let you take charge. That way we'll save some lives. How many lives do you think would be lost to a communist regime? It's just stupid. Plus, we would lose all of our rights. We'd be living under a communist regime. Was that worth it? No. So that whole notion of, it's worth it, is just stupid. So let's not say that anymore. People on the left, because it makes you look stupid. And people on the right, or people in the middle, or people wherever who understand how stupid that is, don't let people get away with saying it. Because when they do say it, if they say, if it would have saved the life of that child, it'd be worth it, right? I say, no. One child does not equal the freedom and liberty and life of 360 million other people. That's just the reality of the world. So you have to accept that and stop saying stupid things like, if it saves one life, it'll be worth it. All right, next I want to talk a little gun talk here. And what I want to talk about today is something that I get asked by people all the time. It's a topic that is ripe on the forums all the time. It's something people love to say whenever you mention 1911s or certain brands of 1911s. And the question is, are Kimbers really just crap? Well, to those people who say that, I want to say, you're full of crap, because Kimbers are not crap. I've owned at least a dozen Kimbers myself, all of them perfectly functioning firearms. For one, 1911s aren't really that difficult to make. And two, they've got a lot of experience making them, and they make some really nice guns. Now, the reason a lot of people think, oh, Kimbers are crap, is I remember one of the main reasons is back in I'd say the, early 2000s to mid 2000s, on the gun forums, before YouTube was really a big thing, people would talk about things, like this gun's crap and that gun's crap. Or one person would say they have a problem with a gun, and then 50 other people would repeat it, and then everyone who reads it thinks that all 51 people had that problem. So it leads to these exaggerated ideas of what actually happened. And an exaggerated idea is why a lot of people think Kimbers are crap. Back in the day, there was a statistic that came out where they were talking about number one sellers of 1911s and which 1911s had the most returns. And this was kind of like a survey of gun shop owners, etc. And they said, well, I'll have to say that I see twice as many Kimbers come back as I do any other 1911. Twice as many Kimbers come back as I do any other 1911. And that made a lot of people think, oh my God, the Kimbers are crap. The Kimbers are crap, or they're crap now that they've moved to Yonkers, wherever it was. They were okay when they were in Oregon, but now that they're in New York or wherever, they're crap. And that's just not the case, because they're like, oh, they didn't have that type of rate when they were made in Oregon. They didn't fail that much. Well, they failed just as much when they were made in Oregon as they were when they were made in New York or wherever it is. The difference is how many of them they sold. And the failure rate's next to nothing anyway. Because you have to remember that during that same time period, people were saying that when you looked at sales records of 1911s, Kimber was selling more 1911s than the other 5 top manufacturers combined. So let's say if Kimber sold 100 1911s and they had 2 failures, well, that would be 2% failure. But if you looked at Colt and they only had 1 failure, because remember, Kimber had twice as many failures as any other manufacturer. Well, if you looked at Colt and they only had 1 failure, that makes it look like, oh, Kimbers fail twice as often as Colts do. But then if you looked at the sales of Colts, when Kimber sold 100 guns, Colt sold 20. So if you actually average that out mathematically, if they're having 1 failure for every 20 guns, that equals out to 5 failures for every 100 guns like Kimber sold. So actually they're half as reliable, and then some, as Kimber. Kimber was more than twice as reliable. Same thing with other manufacturers. If you looked at how many they made, well, they might have only 1 failure too, but they only sold 50 guns. That makes them just as unreliable as Kimber, the nice custom, more expensive guns. Because they only had 1 failure, they only sold 50 guns, that still ends up to 2 out of 100 failed. And I'm not saying that 1 or 2 out of every 100 guns failed. I'm just using this as simple math for people out there, because my viewers ain't that. We ain't that smarts when it comes to numbers. So I like to keep it to where I can understand it, so I know everyone else can understand it. So basically you're looking at, yeah, maybe they had twice as many failures, but they sold way more guns. Like I said, if I sell 100 items and only 1 of them's bad, that's not the same rate. That's not the same reliability rate as someone who sells 5 items and 1 of them's bad. That's a 20% failure rate. You can't just compare 1 failure to 1 failure. You have to factor in how many are out there on the market. If you control 80% of the market, well, then if all guns were equal, you'd have 80% of the failures. If you control 80% of the market and you only have 30% of the failures, well, that means you're functioning twice as good as most everybody else. So it's simple math. That's the problem. People just don't understand simple math. That mentality caught on like wildfire back in the forums. They took that and they ran with it for years. And I still see stuff repeated today that came from those days. Like, oh, well, Kimbers come back at twice the rate that Colt does, or Kimbers come back at twice the rate as Nighthawk, or whatever. It's all bad math, and that's what made people think that. And it's the fact that people repeated everything. And here's one thing I will tell you right now. Another thing about disinformation on the internet as far as reliability of firearms, if someone loves Smith & Wesson and hates Glock, and someone says, oh, my Glock failed and this is how it failed, you'll get 20 people that love Smith & Wesson who've never even owned a Glock repeat the same shit. My Glock failed, blah, blah, blah. Acting like it happened to them because they want to disparage the gun they don't like. A lot of people don't like 1911s. A lot of people don't like Kimber now, so they disparage them. But as far as 1911s go, they make more of them than anybody else. They sell more of them, and they make them very well. I've had dozens of them. I've never had a Kimber 1911 fail. I've had Colts fail. I've had a Smith & Wesson that failed. The worst one I ever had that failed the worst was a Colt. It happens. There's lemons in every batch. You know, in every bushel of apples, there's a lemon somewhere. That's not actually true, but you understand what I'm trying to say. So Kimbers are not crap. This whole notion that they're crap is crap. It's bad math. It's not understanding that people like to make shit up. And it's also, even people that aren't making shit up, if they see, oh, this Glock exploded, this Glock 40 exploded in this police officer's face, well, they'll see the report that someone says, like, here in Oregon, which is where it happened, here in Oregon, this happened to this cop. And then someone will say it in Texas, and people will think, well, it happened in Texas too. And then someone will repeat it in Ohio, and they're like, oh, it happened in Ohio too. You know, so it's just word of mouth garbage. It's just people not understanding statistics. It's just people not understanding how to figure out reliability. And it's also people having grudges against certain manufacturers, certain types of guns, etc. It's all just a bunch of hens clucking loudly about stuff they don't understand. And in the end, no, Kimber is not crap. Kimber makes some great 1911s, if that's the type of 1911 you're looking for, and they're definitely worth the money, they're worth the effort, they're worth everything because they are good guns. Kimber is definitely not crap. All right, I want to close out the show today with our viewer EDC of the day, our concealed carrier of the day. And today we have William. And William is carrying his EAA Windicator, a gun you don't see very often, but it's a revolver, so I'm going to give him points for that right there. And he's carrying it in a nondescript inside waistband Kydex holster, which he says simply disappears when he drops his shirt on this gun. Even though it is a large gun and a heavy gun, he barely even notices it's there. And I'm going to give William credit here for the fact that he's carrying a revolver. Everyone knows I like revolvers, and obviously we have a couple other things in common too. He likes a couple of things I like, because you can tell from this picture he likes Old Spice and cookies. I like both those things also. So our concealed carrier of the day, our viewer EDC of the day, comes to us from William, and like I said, it is an EAA Windicator in an inside waistband Kydex holster. All right, everybody, thanks for showing up for another episode of Inside Guns with your host, me, the Yankee Marshal. Hope to see you again tomorrow. Until then, I want to remind everyone that this channel is fully viewer funded. We do not accept any type of advertising. We do not accept any type of sponsorship. We don't accept anything except for donations from viewers. If you want to become a posse member and be someone who supports the channel, please go over to patreon.com/the Yankee Marshal. Sign up to be a patron. Get yourself a pin, a patch, or whatever level you want to sign up for over there. And with that being said, I'll just sign off as usual by saying, as far as the state of the world is concerned today, it is what it is. But in the future, if we continue to work together and do the things I know we can do, what it will be in the future is something better.